Okay, round 2 of our assignment review. So we already reviewed the questions and we're going to go through some pictures, and just like the urinalysis review, I'm going to have some extra pictures for us to practice at the end. The first picture is melena. So this is digested blood that has passed in the feces, and it has a black tarry substance. And we know that it comes from the upper GI, such as gastric ulcers. This is frank blood, and this usually comes from the lower GI, and it's kind of mucousy, and we call it hemorrhagic gastroenteritis, or HGE. These examples are just to notate that it's important to describe the consistency and color and what other else you can find in the feces to help to see what's going on with the pet. This image is our first kind of comparison image to show you a roundworm versus a hookworm and an artifact. So we have this fun little air bubble that sometimes they like to play mind tricks on you. And then seeing at this roundworm, how the size of it and the outer shell. And then our little hookworm is kind of a thinner shell and almost like a bunched up looking material on the inside. And then remembering to use our fancy words, then we have a Toxocara canis and Ancylostoma. This is a closer up picture of our Ancylostoma or hookworm. So again, it has a smaller shell, but kind of some bunched up material inside. This image is our whipworm, or Trichuris vulpes, and then of course one of our fun little air bubbles again. The giveaway to these guys is the football shape and then our bipolar ends. This is one of my favorite pictures. It'll come up in more lectures this semester. You'll see it next semester in parasitology, but it's just a really pretty picture. And then also getting your size comparison between a roundworm and coccidia. So our Toxocara and our Cystoisospora. This image comes from a bovine sample that I notated on your homework. So here we do have our air bubbles and then this large hookworm style egg. And in bovine, there's so many species and they're hard to differentiate. So we call them a trichostrongyle type. Kitty's helping me, sorry. This is the image I showed to you guys earlier in the semester. And so it's a tapeworm, or Diploidium caninum. And these eggs are usually too heavy to float. So we usually see them in a direct, or in this case, I actually physically put a tapeworm onto the slide and it squished all of its eggs out. And then you can see they're different in the fact that they don't have like one individual egg shell. They're like little egg packets. This image is this really thick, hard shell. We don't have anything for size comparison, but this is our Tenia species of tapeworm. This little fungi with his smiley face is our Giardia. He's got the flagella here to help him move around, which we have two different types that we see, either the trophozoite, which is what we see here, or the cyst form. And then knowing when we test for them in our ELISAs that we're testing for cyst wall protein and not an antibody or antigen like our other ones. This egg here is Parascaris equorum, which is our equine roundworm. And this one is our Ascaris suum, which is our roundworm for pigs. And this one's pretty identifiable from its rough edges around that really hard shell. But you can see it still has that traditional shape of a roundworm. This little guy here, it's alligator shaped, is a Demodex. We do have to do a deep skin scrape to actually get this on diagnosis because of where it lives. So like a tape prep where you would get some other mites, you wouldn't necessarily get any Demodex because you really need to scrape deep in those follicles to get some of them out. And then knowing that this is a normal flora, even you and me have them on our face, so don't freak out. But when they become pathology is when the immune system is lowered for some reason, or say in a puppy where we see most often where their immune system isn't quite developed yet. This is our Ododectes cyanotus. These are the ear mites, and one of our key terms to recognize that we need to get a sample on some mineral oil to look at are the wax is like a thick, granular, really dark, like coffee ground substance. So when we see that, we know that there's probably some ear mites going on. This is bringing us a little bit back to micro, where we talked about getting diarrhea in our young animals. That Clostridium perfringens is one of our most common types of bacteria that's causing diarrhea. So as you can see, they have these little sporulated bodies as well, and that's a way to recognize them. So now we're going into our little fun review here. So we have some size comparison. So our fun little air bubble, and then a roundworm or Toxicara, and then some hookworm buddies hanging out there. These pictures will come back up in parasitology as well, so make sure that you're really looking at these, or if you start to know them now, it's going to be easier for you to know them in the future. So this one is a roundworm, and possibly a hookworm friend hanging out with it, an Ancylostoma. And this guy's another kind of roundworm that I've seen once in practice, but it can happen. Mostly in southern regions you'd see it, but this is Balis ascaris, which is a raccoon roundworm that's zoonotic. And here's another little party picture. So looking at our size, our big large guy is the first thing that catches your eye, right? So we know that these are our roundworms. And then look at our little hookworm buddy hanging out here. And then shoot, a little whipworm, Trichuris vulpus, found its way in. This slide is one of the stock photos that we had found at some point in time that shows kind of a size comparison between our roundworm and our tapeworm, our Diploidium egg packet. So you can see how big it is and why it doesn't end up showing up in floats. It's too heavy. But even going back to the roundworm's pretty heavy too. And then here's another picture of our Diploidium caninum in a microscope photo where you can really see all the little egg packets. And then another artifact where this vegetation that maybe some grass was chewed up or weeds or something, that can be an artifact in your fecals as well. And then looking at these two different kinds of hookworms from either a bovine sample or an equine sample, where they look similar, and there's many other species that look just similar as this, so we would call it our trichostrongyl type, or in a horse we'd call it a strongyl type. And then this is an example of if a fecal sample is left out for too long at room temperature, where the eggs can continue to grow and go through their cycle, or maybe a sample sat outside in the grass for too long. But this, when you find it looking like this, it's called larvating. It's starting to go into its next stage. Here we have a sarcoptiform mite. So the mite that causes scabies, and you can tell by its round shape and kind of little short stubby legs. And this is our Chyletiella species. These are walking dandruff. And they're identified also by their really unique mouth part. And I don't know, for some reason that exclamation point always stood out to me. Kyla Tiala! Then our last slide is 2 different lice. And the lice that has the more pointed nose, we know that that's a sucking louse, where the more blunt nose of our lice would be a chewing, where its mouth part is kind of in here. So if you were to be asked how to tell a difference between a chewing louse and a sucking louse, then its mouth parts are different, and that's how you would describe them. If you have any questions, let me know.